Hey guys, Zack here, and this is my review of Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated. Okay, so this episode doesn't really have any of the overarching mystery stuff that was in the previous episodes, but it is just a classic whodunit mystery like they normally do. But yeah, this episode is kind of interesting in that the monster kind of looks really legit, and I do kind of like it as a monster. But in case the episode actually winds up opening up with Daphne actually babysitting a kid named Arthur, who we actually meet in this episode. They're actually watching a show called Mr. Broccoli Head before turning him into bed. We actually do see that. We actually do wind up seeing that, finding out that Arthur is a very big Mr. Broccoli Head fan, but because his room is decorated in memorabilia for it. But in case they're watching TV and Daphne eventually decides that that's enough and that's time for Arthur to go to bed, and proceeds to bring him upstairs, and he merely tells her that she's the best babysitter ever, and she responds to that by blowing him a kiss and wishing him good night. At which point she goes back downstairs to wait for his parents to show up and let her off the hook. But in any case, while this is happening, we suddenly see a strange creature standing outside, and it starts blowing into a pan flute, and which Daphne actually winds up picking up on, and hears it, as does Arthur. And we don't really find out what it is initially. Daphne just points out that it's very weird for them to actually be hearing for someone to be playing a pan flute at that hour, and then decides to go up and check on Arthur when she hears something coming from his room, and when she comes in, she discovers that Arthur is some sort of creepy monster child thing, and proceeds to chase her around the house, and she can just barely escape him as he kind of just freaks her out and chases her out of the house, and she eventually winds up leaping out the window to get somewhere safe. At which point, Arthur just kind of locks the window behind her, and proceeds to just kind of occupy the house by himself. But in case the next morning, Daphne then proceeds to explain what she saw to the rest of the gang as they're driving on the way to school, and she actually points out that obviously this is a very strange thing, and obviously it warrants some investigating, and Fred kind of dismisses the whole thing, wondering if she just gave him too much sugar, but she merely remarks that sugar doesn't cause people to grow fangs, which Shaggy takes as a sign of relief, because he and Scooby are currently eating a box of donuts, and he admits that he loves his sugar. But Velma actually winds up scolding him for his grammar, because as we find out, and this is a recurring thing from the previous episode that continues as a thread in this episode, but she's trying to kind of make Shaggy a better person, and one of the things she's actually going about doing that is that she actually wants him to stop saying "like" so much, which obviously he says a lot. And Shaggy merely apologizes, pointing out that he forgot, and which annoys Velma a little bit. But in any case, Daphne just suggests that they actually go and check in on Arthur before they actually go to school, and Fred points out that he has no problem with that, pointing out that there's nothing that they might as well investigate since there's nothing worthwhile going on at school. But then decides against it when we find out that he's actually flunking civics class. As it turns out, Fred is apparently not doing very well in civics, and remarks that if he doesn't pass, he'll be off whatever team he's on. Apparently, he's on some sort of team, but I don't actually know what sport he actually plays. Just that he's on a team, but in any case, Daphne immediately volunteers to actually go and investigate, to tutor Fred, pointing out that which she naturally subtly points out would be a good excuse for the two of them to be alone together. But Fred merely points out that his dad already got him a tutor, pointing out that she's a senior, and is a very skilled student, and Daphne actually winds up getting a little bit jealous when he finds out that the tutor is actually a girl. So she kind of points out that she's not too particularly happy about that. But yeah, in any case, they do wind up arriving at Arthur's neighborhood to go investigate, and discover that apparently according to Sheriff Stone and Fred Jones Sr., apparently it wasn't just Arthur. As we find out, all of the kids are actually all of the parents are actually evacuating the Arthur's immediate neighborhood, and and as we find out from Fred Jones Sr. and Sheriff Stone, all of the kids in the neighborhood have been spookified and have kind of gone completely crazy. And obviously nobody's entirely sure what the cause of it actually is, but Daphne decides to do what she was there for and actually goes to ask Arthur's parents what's going on with Arthur, and then she finds out that Arthur is still very much spookified, which the parents merely remark should answer her question, and with that they pack up their stuff and leave. And it's at this point where we find out that apparently soon all of the kids, it's only going to be just kids in the neighborhood, and Daphne merely points out her frustration with that, pointing out that they can't just leave the kids alone in the neighborhood until they sort the whole mess out. But Sheriff Stone merely remarks that they're just going to airdrop some food in and that it'll probably be fine. Pointing out that they can learn how to make macaroni cheese, regardless of whether they're spookified or not. He points out it doesn't really matter all that much, but in case, Fred merely remarks that's kind of terrible, and also points out that it seems like they have another mystery on their hands. At which point, Fred Jones Sr. responds by immediately having the kids arrested. With Fred obviously pointing out that is a little bit uncalled for, and pointing out that they could actually help and solve the mystery and figure out what the creature actually is that's attacking Crystal Cove, but he merely remarks that the creature obviously he pulls out a picture of it. He remarks that the creature is obviously a big source of revenue and tourism for them, and obviously he doesn't want Fred getting in the way of that, and tells him that the best way he can actually help right now is by going to school so that he doesn't actually wind up flunking out of his civics class. And with that, he puts them all in an armored van and drives them to school personally. And then at school we actually do find out a little bit more about what's going on at school life. We actually see another scene between Shaggy and Velma, and Scooby actually goes to get Shaggy some more food, even though he's not supposed to be there. I should be perfectly honest with. Dogs aren't allowed to be allowed in school, and yet Scooby's just here casually for fun. I couldn't really. I think that's been a thing in the previous episodes, but I couldn't really explain to you why. But in case Scooby goes to get Shaggy to go get some more food, at which point Shaggy asks him to go bring him some seconds as well, but realizing he said again in front of Velma, profusely apologizes to her. At which point she responds by just giving him a rubber band and telling him to put it on his wrist, and that every time he says again, he should pull back on it and hard. What she remarks it feels like that would actually hurt, but she remarks that that's actually the idea, and then also pulls out a clothing catalog, pointing out that she's actually thinking of getting Shaggy some new pants, because according to herself, he's worn the same pants since 8th grade, but although he remarks that they're actually pretty comfortable pants, and when he actually can't decide on some new pants, she merely picks it up, and she picks up the catalog and decides that she'll actually pick something out for him instead, and with that she leaves. At which point he points out that she's kind of rubbing him the wrong way, but then realizes that he said again, and actually snaps the rubber band, which winds up being a really comical scene where he winds up hurting himself so loud that he actually winds up screaming, and you can actually, and there's actually a real zoom out to show the magnification of the scream. But in case at the library, Fred is actually about to meet with his tutor, and remarks that he's curious about what kind of girl she is, and Daphne actually winds up cracking her knuckles, pointing out that she can't wait to meet her as well. It's not so subtly implying that she's going to beat the shit out of the girl for trying to steal his man. But in any case, we then actually wind up meeting the tutor, and then she's actually a girl named Marianne, who, as we find out, is apparently a lot younger than Daphne should have been worried about. So yeah, as we find out, even though she's a senior, Marianne is 11, 12 maybe. She has a very high IQ, but she has a very high IQ and should actually be and as by her own admission should actually be in college. But remarks that she actually doesn't have very good social skills, and her parents actually made her sign up for high school for a couple of weeks to actually pick up on those and actually learn some social skills. And then we find out there is actually some truth to that, because she actually winds up and she has a verbal tick where she actually will clear her throat repeatedly. But in any case, she merely responds to, after that, by grabbing Fred by the hand and then proceeding to drag him further into the library so that they could actually go and study some more, with Daphne merely telling them to have fun now that she's no longer worried about Fred going gaga over another girl. But in any case, it's at this point where we actually meet Dr. Fortillo, who Daphne actually winds up running into by accident and causing him to drop some of his books. And we don't learn much about Dr. Fortillo other than that he's actually a foreign exchange teacher and is there to teach a world history from another angle, and is actually a foreign substitute teacher in that regard. But Dr. Fortillo actually winds up apologizing to her, pointing out that he actually wound up running into her by accident and that he didn't mean to. But merely remarks that he's actually late for his lecture, and that's why he wasn't paying attention. And with that, he then proceeds to scoop up his stuff and leave. But at which point Daphne hollers back to him, pointing out after noticing that he forgot a book, but then discovers that the page is actually open to the same creature that has been spookifying the kids, which Dr. Fortillo merely responds to by scooping up the book and actually scooping it up and carrying it off. Which causes Daphne to actually become a little bit suspicious. But in any case, the next day we actually do find out what we actually do find out there was indeed another incident with spookified kids, where they actually wind up going off and onward into going to investigate some more, and they're actually walking to school a little bit, trying to discuss what they know about the spookified kids so far. But and also in the process, we actually find out that Velma has actually bought Shaggy some new pants, and they're a little too tight. So yeah, he's wearing some very tight pants and actually can't walk in them, and he even remarks that to Velma as they're walking, pointing out that they're way too tight and he actually can't move in them. But also remarks that they make him feel like a sausage, and he actually doesn't snap the wristband because in this instance, like is grammatically correct. So. But in case, as they're walking to school, they actually run into another evacuated neighborhood where more kids have actually gone missing, and where more kids have actually gone spookified, and more parents are actually moving out as a result of that. So yeah, we find out that the spookified kids are actually causing more problems. But in any case, it merely remarked that seems like at this rate the whole town will actually be spookified as well, and there will be no more adults left. But in case, it's at this point where we actually find out that Velma's mother, Mrs. Dinkley, she's actually running a tour bus attraction through the town, pointing out that it's the latest location of the recently group of spookified kids. But after seeing her daughter and her friends there, she merely greets Velma like she's just supposed to be there, and then immediately calls the cops on her, pointing out that they're back. But Velma merely remarks that they were just there to see what was going on, and Fred wonders if they can actually investigate a little bit further. But Velma's mother merely scolds them, pointing out that it doesn't really matter if they're curious or not; they still need to go to school, and then tells them to immediately get out and go away and leave. But also before she does this, she actually winds up handing Velma a creature T-shirt, which she merely tells Velma to just promote every time she's asked, and that winds up becoming a recurring bit for the rest of the episode. But so Velma winds up putting the T-shirt over her sweater, and they just kind of go to school that way. But in case, they then proceed to actually go and investigate and weigh their options and figure out if they can actually find out more about the creature that's actually spookifying the kids. At which point, Daphne remarks that they should actually go to Dr. Fortillo, since, as she remarks, he likely knows something about it, considering he had a book on the subject. So they actually do wind up going to his office while at school, and note that he's not there, and Daphne just chalks it up to him possibly teaching a class, but they do decide to actually investigate around, and Shaggy's a little curious as to what the guy actually teaches, pointing out that his memorabilia around his office is very weird. But then remarks that he actually said like again and just holds out his wrist so that Velma can actually snap the rubber band on it, which is really funny. But in any case, Dr. Fortillo actually walks into his room and is upset that they're actually in his office, pointing out that this is a private place and wonders why they're there. But they merely remark that they're actually there to pick his brain about the strange creature, and Dr. Fortillo actually remarks that he knows what creature they're talking about, and actually drops a name, Que Horrifico, which we actually do find out is a creature of legend, where where a man would actually transform into Que Horrifico in the middle of the night, and would actually terrorize villages by spookifying kids, and would just kind of rampage all over the city. But in any case, as we find out, Fred actually notices that Mr. Fortillo actually has a what is it called? He actually has a pan flute on his desk, and wonders where he got it, thinking it's a blow dart gun. But in any case, Daphne merely points out that that's actually a pan flute, which Dr. Fortillo actually winds up flying into a rage over this, pointing out that obviously they're not supposed to have that sort of thing. That obviously the fact that he has a pan flute is suspicious, but he points out that is no way makes him Que Horrifico, and points out that they shouldn't actually be suspecting him. But then everybody points out that they actually didn't accuse him of anything, and that he's flying off the handle for no reason. At which point he recomposes himself, and pointing out that he actually did a lecture on Que Horrifico previously. He decides to actually go and retrieve the slides, and we'll meet them in about 5 minutes. At which point he comes back, and we find out a little bit more about Que Horrifico, about how it used a pan flute to turn people into spookified kids, and that long story short, it's the incidents that it was involved with are very similar to what we actually seen Crystal Cove take over. Obviously, there's already the point about how it terrorizes villages by spookifying kids, but what we do find out is that apparently it's been around for a while, and that apparently the people who transform into it are completely unaware of the fact that those who transform into it are actually transformed. They just appear normal for the most part, as I said, but in case with that, he then hopes that will actually satisfy their curiosity, and then points out that he's actually going to be heading home, pointing out that they actually decided to take the rest of the afternoon off, pointing out that he hasn't been sleeping well for the past couple of nights, and then proceeds to actually just go home. At which point Velma actually proceeds to actually posit her theory about Dr. Fortillo, and also in the process, somebody asks her about the T-shirt, and she remarks that it's $15. At which point she proceeds to point out that that Dr. Fortillo is very suspicious for a number of reasons, namely that he hasn't been sleeping well, he has a pan flute, he's very knowledgeable on the subject of Que Horrifico, and also not as suspiciously, but she thinks she should bring it up, he has an accent, which Fred does point out that is very suspicious, and that they should actually take the opportunity later that night to actually go and investigate Dr. Fortillo and make sure he's not actually Que Horrifico. But they're actually stopped by Marianne, who kind of lectures Fred about being late to their tutor meeting, but which Fred really remarks that something more important came up, which she remarks is complete and utter bullcrap, because as she points out, there couldn't be anything more important than physics, and also in the process remarks that when she actually hauls up Fred, remarks that she actually has been learning civics, because as she finds out, as we do find out I'm doing this a little bit out of order, but as we find out, she actually took an interest in civics because she wanted to be part of the town council for the town, but she wasn't allowed to for being too young. So yeah, even though she by her own mission, she has some pretty brilliant ideas for the town, and is a little bit annoyed. But in case later that night, they actually go to find Dr. Fortillo's house and decide to actually go and investigate, and decide to sneak up outside his window to keep an eye on him. And Shaggy attempts to sneak, but can't, because obviously his pants are way too long and way too tight. So he winds up. So in the process, while the other members of Mystery Inc. are actually trying to investigate, they point out that he needs to get down, and that Dr. Fortillo will actually see him. But in the process, Shaggy actually winds up tripping over himself and winds up falling on top of some trash cans. But which wind up alluring Dr. Fortillo to the fact that the kids are out there, and he is completely right about the fact that they're suspicious of him, and that they think he's Que Horrifico. But he then points out that he actually returns that sentiment, pointing out that he does think he's Que Horrifico, and wonders if they can actually help him. And with that, he actually has them chain him to his living room chair, and and with Fred merely remarking that he would like to meet his chain guy personally, but Dr. Fortillo merely remarks that the transformation is actually so complete that he actually may not be aware of the fact that he's Que Horrifico, and for that reason he actually bought some change to restrain himself to the chair until they can actually confirm whether or not he is actually Que Horrifico. And while they're actually waiting for the full moon to come up, Shaggy and Scooby actually wind up turning on the TV and turning on Mr. Broccoli Head, which they actually wind up laughing at, as apparently it's not just for kids, it's apparently for adults as well, if you're into that sort of thing. And yeah, Mr. Broccoli Head's entire thing is that gets people's names wrong. I should bring that up, but it's very funny. But in any case, once the full moon comes up, Miss Dr. Fortillo actually winds up panicking because he feels that the transformation is coming on. So Fred immediately turns the TV off, and they all gather around Dr. Fortillo to see if he's actually going to transform. And as it turns out, no, it's not. It's just gas. But they actually then wind up hearing a pan flute outside, and discover that Dr. Fortillo's neighborhood is being attacked by Que Horrifico while he's actually inside and being chained up to his chair. So they quickly realize that he couldn't actually be Que Horrifico if they're actually appearing in two places at once. And it's Dr. Fortillo who comically comes out chained up to his chair. He's so relieved of the fact that he's actually not Que Horrifico. But Fred merely realizes that now that they know that Dr. Fortillo is not Que Horrifico, they'll actually need to find another way to actually trap it. And with that, he remarks that he'll actually set a trap for it. At which point they then proceed to look around the abandoned neighborhoods to try and figure out where Que Horrifico is least likely to strike. And eventually, they wind up finding out that there's actually a house for sale, which they remark is very strange, since obviously Que Horrifico wouldn't go and attack it, and obviously they realize that that's actually the point. Velma even points out that obviously since nobody lives there and nobody's insane enough to actually move in while there's a monster terrorizing the place, remarks that Que Horrifico is likely not going to attack the house. At which point Daphne lets out a not so subtle implication that she would like to move into the house with Fred, pointing out that it's perfect for a couple who's just starting out, since it's fully furnished and is obviously while it is kind of a piece of work, it is fully furnished in a perfect place for a couple to actually move in. But Fred doesn't get the subtext of that and actually winds up just pointing out that it won't be when he's done with it. At which point he then gets in to get ready to set his trap. At which point they reveal what their plan actually is, which is to actually pose as a family and just lower Que Horrifico in to actually try and maybe brainwash Shaggy and Scooby. But in any case, Daphne tries to snuggle up to Fred, who is in disguise, but Fred merely tells her to get up to not look too happy since they're married, which is a very messed up thing to say. Perfectly, you can be happily married. There's nothing wrong with that. But yeah, apparently that's just like what Fred's interpretation of marriage is. But in any case, they make a big show of Shaggy and Scooby actually coming up and being sent to bed, and Shaggy and Scooby merely remarks that it's embarrassing, but Shaggy merely remarks that he's just happy to be out of his very tight pants. So it's at this point where they actually get changed to actually go to bed, and while they wait for Que Horrifico to show up and try to brainwash Shaggy and Scooby, but it's at this point, but also there's a very comical scene where as Velma is actually looking out the window waiting for them to spring the trap, Shaggy and Scooby ask him if they can have a bedtime story, and she just responds with yes, the end, which is very funny. But in any case, Que Horrifico shows up and starts playing his pan flute. At which point Fred actually winds up springing the trap, which is revealed to actually be inside the trash cans outside the house, which just kind of shoots a net, and they actually do wind up trapping Que Horrifico inside the net, which winds up working out, and they actually go to confront Que Horrifico and try to unmask him, but Que Horrifico merely responds to that by playing his pan flute and summoning his horde of spookified kids to actually attack them. And with that, they actually the advantage actually winds up going completely away. And at which point Que Horrifico remarks that the town is theirs and that these adults have no place for them. At which point the spookified kids wind up swarming the house, and they try to barricade themselves in the house, but the spookified kids are revealed to be very crafty, and they actually wind up getting the group away from the door by using a bottle of oil, which they wind up slipping on, and they wind up getting away from the door, and with no way of actually defending themselves against the kids, they actually run upstairs to try and fend them off that way. So Scooby and Shaggy actually wind up running up the stairs, but since Shaggy has very baggy shorts and actually can't run very fast, Scooby actually winds up having to rescue him from the spookified kids, and they eventually wind up hiding in a closet. While Fred, Daphne, and Velma actually wind up hiding inside one of the upstairs bedrooms and wind up barricading the door. But then the kids actually wind up grabbing Velma and almost pull her out the window, and Daphne actually winds up grabbing her and pulling her back, which winds up resulting in the Que Horrifico t-shirt being ripped. At which point the two of them actually wind up barricading the window with a table, and eventually Fred actually gets a brilliant idea where they all group together and get behind him. At which point they just let the kids come in and they knock each other out, and they proceed to run out of the bedroom and downstairs and into the downstairs. At which point so the kids eventually figure out where Scooby and Shaggy are hiding and actually wind up cornering them, and they remark that they believe that this would be the end, but and say their final goodbyes while Fred, Daphne, and Velma are actually cornered in the living room in front of the TV, and this winds up being important because at the last minute, when it seems like they're about to be finished off by the swarm of angry kids, Fred accidentally turns on the TV by stepping on the remote, which causes Mr. Broccolihead to come on, and all the kids wind up abandoning their chase to actually go and watch Mr. Broccolihead, and at which point it's revealed that the kids actually weren't brainwashed. As it turns, Que Horrifico actually runs in to actually yell at them for not doing their jobs, at which point it's revealed that it's just wigs, teeth, and a couple of other cosmetics that they use to actually disguise themselves as spookified kids. At which point the gang, realizing that Que Horrifico is no longer a threat, proceed to chase after him and chase him out of the house out of the house, at which point Que Horrifico winds up shutting off Fred's trap again. He winds up getting stuck in another net, at which point Fred Jones Sr. and Sheriff Stone actually wind up investigating, wondering what the hell is going on, at which point Fred merely remarks that they've actually caught Que Horrifico and proceed to unmask him, except he is actually revealed to be a she, and we find out that it's actually Marianne the tutor, which Fred Jones Sr. is actually a little confused about because he has no idea why Marianne would actually attack him, but we do actually have a pretty good idea, which is that obviously Marianne wanted to be on the town council, but she was turned away for being too young. So to kind of eliminate any possibility of her actually being replaced, and Fred Jones Sr. having no choice but to put her on the town council, she used the fact that it's actually revealed that she was actually in the class that Dr. Fortillo actually taught the Que Horrifico lecture to, and that's where she got the idea to become Que Horrifico and just scare off all the adults by pretending to spookify the kids, and also offered the kids utopia in exchange for doing what you wanted, but when that didn't work, she offered them candy, which the kids obviously accepted, but in case she then proceeded to use the guys at Que Horrifico to chase out all the adults so that nobody would stand in her way, and remarks that she would have gotten away with it, and then but if it weren't for the mailing kids, which she actually says in Latin, which nobody actually fully understands, and she actually winds up having to explain how it loosely translated means meddling kids. But in case Sheriff Stone immediately has her arrested, which she is a little confused about, pointing out that she's just a kid, but he merely remarks that they have a lot of unsold memorabilia regarding her Que Horrifico incident, and obviously they can't sell any of it anymore. So now she's in a lot of trouble. But in case with that mystery actually solved, the kids actually wind up assembling at Angel Dynamite's radio station, where they actually wind up kind of celebrating a little bit and celebrating the victory with a pizza. And also there's a really funny scene where Scooby plays the planet flute, and Shaggy decides to mess with him by pretending to be spookified, and he winds up and Scooby actually winds up being very terrified, which Shaggy merely remarks that it was just a joke, but then it's revealed that Scooby isn't so much scared of Shaggy as it is the guy standing behind him. At which point we see what is believed to be Que Horrifico, which the gang obviously freaks out over, considering that they think Que Horrifico shouldn't in any way be back, but then they find out that it's just Dr. Fortillo, who decided to dress up in a poncho with his pan flute and decides to give them a personal pan flute concert as a thank you for clearing his name and as a and arresting the real Que Horrifico. At which point he starts actually playing his pan flute, and everybody starts jamming out to it. And Shaggy and Velma actually wind up getting into a ballroom dance situation where Shaggy actually tells her to return the pants that she bought. Which Velma is obviously very upset over, but Shaggy immediately tells her that he likes baggy things, and obviously they're way too tight anyways because he couldn't actually walk in them. So he just points out that that if she's going to buy pants for him, make them baggy. And with that, the episode just kind of ends. So yeah, this episode is just kind of funny, and that's just a little classic whodunit mystery. But there is no overarching mystery to this one. It's literally just on its own, but. Yeah, I do kind of like that as well, because obviously you don't need some sort of big elaborate mystery to actually do a thing. But I do like it. I do like this episode. This episode is very spooky and a little bit funny, and also I do like the fact that the person who actually wound up terrorizing the group was just somebody who bribed off a bunch of kids. That's kind of funny, or rather a girl who just bribed off a bunch of kids. But yeah. This episode, I did like this episode. I did like how interesting this episode was. I did also like how it was kind of off by itself, but it was kind of fillery, but not really. But yeah, in any case, that's gonna do it for my review of Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated. What you guys think? Let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below, or over on my Discord server, link in the description. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, be sure to follow me on Twitter in the description below. Be sure to check out my Patreon in the description below as well. It's only a couple bucks a month. It does really help me out, and you guys get access to a bunch of cool perks. I'm always saying thanks. So it's just yeah, be sure to go check those out. Link is down in the description. And finally, if you want to see more content from me, then be sure to check out the videos linked in the end screen. The top video is the most recent one, whereas the bottom one is based on what you've already seen from me. So if you want to try something new, or some more of what you like, then be sure to check both of those videos out. But in any case, thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, we'll see you guys in the next video. Peace!